Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from 670 The Scores, Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. He's in New Orleans at the Superdome where the Bears lost to the Saints 24-17. This is our post-game podcast reaction on Take the North. And the reaction to this one is like so many others, Dan. A lot of missed opportunities, a lot of mistakes self-inflicted by the Bears. You can't turn the ball over 4 times if you're Tyson, Bagent, and expect to win. They were more competitive. That's a low bar. But this was one of those games that kind of teased you into thinking it was possible the Bears could win. And then you're being reminded why they can't win and don't win these kind of games.
Right. And I think, David, where the frustration is where we left off on Thursday when we were talking about the preview of this game and understanding that the Saints aren't very good and that, like you should be able at some point in your development, at some point in your climb to be able to seize opportunity in games like this against opponents like this. The Saints aren't very good and they didn't play very good. And there you are hanging around in a game and you get into the fourth quarter with a tie score and you have an opportunity to finally have that breakthrough, and then all of a sudden it's a turnover avalanche and a penalty avalanche and a mistake avalanche, and the next thing you know, here we are at 2-7. Fast forward into a short week against the Panthers this week, and we're just in the same cycle of they're not that good, and at some point they've got to get better.
They're not that good, and they need to get better, and that can be somewhat redundant. Every postgame can tell a different story. You were in the locker room in New Orleans. How would you describe it? Who did you talk to?
Yeah, obviously we started with Montez Sweat today just because that's a guy who obviously is going to now be here for the long haul, at least a few more seasons after signing that 4-year, $98 million extension. On Saturday, this is a guy who came into the day. The plan was, David, as you know, to play him primarily on third downs and 2-minute situations and mix them in where it otherwise made sense. Didn't have a major impact. Like 2 tackles on the stat sheet. He had a 1 credited for a pass defense when he beat Ryan Ramczyk around the edge and was able to hit Derek Carr in the shoulder. If you're watching that play live, you think, hey, that might be a strip sack. And Eddie Jackson scoops up the loose football and he's racing to the end zone. You say, maybe that's the kind of break the Bears need. It was correctly ruled an incomplete pass, but that was about all we heard from Montez Sweat today. And so look, like there's a bigger discussion to be had here, and maybe this is the entry point for it now. The Bears rewarded him with money for him to be one of the every week elite game changers in this league. And obviously it's a difficult ask in game 1 after a 3-day week with your new team and a whirlwind of trying to get your feet on the ground. But going forward, it is absolutely justifiable to expect major contributions from Montez Sweat because that's who the Bears rewarded him, and that's how he's going to have to produce.
The way I feel about this is probably going to sound a little bit like rationalization or giving them a little bit of a pass, but I think that when anybody's in a situation where they're desperate to start something and they need credibility, the Bears aren't operating. They're not able to make a decision on Montez Sweat or that edge rusher the way that maybe 24 of the 32 teams in the league are. I mean, they're not a competitive franchise. They haven't won a playoff game in 13 years. They are the bottom of the barrel in the NFL. So we tend to want to treat them like as maybe we should keep the standards high, like they are the Patriots, like they are the Chiefs, like they're the 49ers. And when you're Ryan Poles and you're desperate for something to get started here and you want credibility, I understand why you overpaid a guy like that. I mean, I know he's not going to get, he's not one of the Bosas. He's not Khalil Mack in his prime. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to get you double-digit sack numbers, but I have no problem with them, number one, assuming that his production over the next 4 years is going to be better than any second-round draft pick they're going to take. And number two, paying him money when they have the most to spend in the league. So I don't really mind them getting, and I understand the urgency, and we want to say that, we will say that, but like he's a guy you had to have. You have no talent on this roster overall. You got to start to build somewhere.
Well, okay, that's fine. But you're paying him to be a star, and we're not just talking about 2023 here. We're talking about 2025. We're potentially talking about 2027, and you need stars on your football team. The Bears have very few, if any, on this current roster. And they just paid star money to a guy that's going to have to produce like that. Montez Sweat, to his credit, in the locker room afterwards, said, look, like, this is security that you aim for when you first get into the league. This is a wonderful comfort to have, but it also brings an elevated level of expectation. And I think he's understanding that he is going to be measured based on the contract that they gave him. And so, having an 8-sack year is not going to register with the masses as, wow, that's a true star that you brought in, and you gave away not only a huge contract, but again, that second-round draft pick is significant. I don't know how we can sit here and bash the organization for the trade they made a year ago, giving away the number 32 overall pick for Chase Claypool, and then shrug off like, it's just a second-round pick. Who knows what they could have gotten in the second round?
Well, I do think, though, that there's a difference in the player coming in return.
No question.
Chase Claypool wasn't going to be as,
no question, but you still gave up a premium draft asset.
Yeah, you did. And I think he's, whether he becomes a star in the next 4 years or allows other people to become stars, will he earn the money? I don't know. But I think at some point in time, you're always going to have one of those deals that stands out for being a bit exorbitant. And I would have preferred the Bears do this than do nothing.
Fine. Did something rather than nothing, and then they did a little of nothing on the field here today. Obviously, Montez Sweat is part of the day's story. The biggest part of the story is the turnovers, and Tyson Bagent offsetting what was an encouraging performance in flashes with 4 giveaways, including 3 interceptions on passes that you just can't make at this level and expect to get away with it. Now, the Bears hung around and they kept getting opportunities, and it felt like they had 9 lives today with the number of times they got the ball back with a chance to still go tie the football game, including a day where we had a double doink, David, 1 doink for each team, with the kickers banging the same set of goalposts on different uprights. But look, like, you can't turn the ball over like that. And there were some moments today where you're just like, man, like, he looked really good. And then you look at the end of the stat sheet and you're just like, you're never going to be competitive in the NFL with four giveaways.
2 different halves. And he was so good in the first half. He looked so much like a battler and a guy who has resilience. And he bounced back from the interception and he seemed unfazed. So much to the point, Dan, Boomer Esiason sitting there in New York in the CBS studio, and he says, if the Bears win, it's hard to replace Justin Fields. It's going to be a difficult thing. And then the second half happened, and now it's there's no question now. I mean, and in fairness to Tyson Bagent, I think that not being there in New Orleans, I watched him handle it post game pretty well professionally. He made it easy for the coaches in terms of, he was that bad in the second half. You can't turn the ball over the way that he did. You can't be fooled on coverages, and you can't throw passes to the defensive backs going to break on and get to. So Justin Fields, who practiced on Friday, I think that puts him in a position to be reasonably expected to play on Thursday. If he doesn't, that means there's been some sort of setback. But
it doesn't necessarily mean there's been a setback as much as it means it's a short week with no practice time. And so it makes the evaluation a little bit more complicated. And I think it's going to be interesting, the decision that they make here, because DJ Moore was one of the players in the locker room after the game, David, that said, I don't know. In a short week, I don't know what we can expect from Justin coming back after, what is a 3-game absence. And you're trying to knock some rust off. You're trying to get back in a rhythm. And with no practice time, it's hard to really get a fair assessment. So it may not be entirely health dependent in terms of the decision they make. They've got to sort through some things this week.
God, they've got to, Dan, they can't overthink this. They're playing the Panthers.
Right.
They're 2-7. You have 8 games to evaluate Justin Fields.
Yeah,
rust and layoffs and 100% versus 85. You can't. These are distinctions you can't make when you stink as badly as the Bears stink.
Fair enough.
Justin Fields has got to play.
Fair enough. If he can squeeze the football and he can throw it and he can get himself acclimated and he puts out a 70% effort, yeah.
He's physically, except for the thumb, fine. And processing wise, he's got 30-some career starts. I saw him throwing on video. You weren't there, I don't think, on Friday. But I don't. To me, it'd be a shocker if he doesn't play now.
Yeah, and we'll see what direction they take it. And again, like, now we're back to our regularly scheduled programming, right? And now it's back to the evaluation of Justin Fields for a 2-7 football team that now is going to have to test itself, because there's still half a season left. and the discouragement and the lack of any sort of tangible, meaningful thing to play for down the stretch of the season is fading. And so now you've got to really test the focus and the grit and all the things that come with being a last place football team trying to make your way across the finish line. And now Justin's got to go take his career by the horns again, and try to steer it back on track.
And that's maybe the biggest development or takeaway from today. If you had won the game and Bagent had been the one part of the reason why, and you're sitting there at 3-6 and you got a struggling coaching staff, might have been like, okay, we're gonna see how far we can ride this, and we're gonna get back into it in a very mediocre NFC, and you can maybe fool some people into believing that the arrow's pointed in the right direction. I think today removed a lot of the doubt if there was any remaining, but you're 2-7.
Yeah.
You're staring at the only thing that's going to matter now in the final 8 games is draft position. You don't know, or that Tyson Bagent has probably announced himself a pretty capable, competent backup who can get you through 2 to 3 games in a pinch. But you've got to make a decision about Justin Fields, and he has 8 games to provide information. And if he doesn't play many of those 8 games because of injury, that's the information he's providing. That's part of the entire evaluation process is availability. So I think that process continues or resumes this week, even though they won't have much practice time. Thursday night, it's a battle for futility at Soldier Field. I can't wait till Al Michaels announces this one.
Yeah, look, like we're going to be talking about draft order again, right? And like, look, like one of these teams has to win, and so somebody's going to go in the wrong direction on that draft board. I think if you're the Bears, you want it to be you because you can keep the Panthers down, and then you obviously need to break through at some point, particularly in these winnable games. And this is obviously now against an inferior opponent, so you're not punching up.
What other things stood out in the post game? The defense had a decent day. Some corners we talked about Sweat. They stopped the run. I didn't mention in my column in 6-7 to score, but I thought Jack Sanborn flew around and had a really strong day. There were other guys in the secondary that I didn't think Eddie Jackson was as active as he looked like he was rusty. He looked like he was not really eager to get too much contact in there. Other guys that probably stood out, who else stood out, Dan?
Well, look, I like the defensive effort is interesting to me because you have these 5 possessions in the fourth quarter, David, that all started in Bears territory, and the Bears only gave up 7 points on that. Now, obviously, they benefit from the clock running out when the game ends and a field goal attempt that hits the upright, but they kept stiffening when the Bears needed them to stiffen. They kept getting the stops when the Bears needed them to get the stops. They get that 4th and short quarterback sneak stop on Derek Carr, and the measurement comes out, and you're like, my God, like these are the types of moments that can help you swing a wayward day into the positive column, and the offense could just never match it. They could never respond with all of those stops in Bears territory. And then you look at the stat sheet, then you go, okay, no takeaways for the 4th time this year, and the 10th time in the Matt Eberflus era. No 4th this year, 8th in the Matt Eberflus, the 4th time in the last 2 years, and you can't win football games with a defense that doesn't make impact plays, and so you've got to get a pass rush, you've got to get a group that takes the ball away, and until you do, you're going to be on the wrong end of all these winnable close games against mediocre opponents.
Yeah, I thought the Bears defense had started to make some progress, and the Saints
they have.
Yeah, and they have, but still the Saints pretty much did. They got the first downs when they needed to. They made the big play when they needed to. They had a great play design on the touchdown pass to Juwan Johnson. Taysom Hill ran all over him. How old is he anyway? He's got to be near 40. Man, that guy's
no.
He's been around forever.
I bet he's not even in his 30s yet.
But, I bet you Taysom Hill's. Let me check while you do some other talking. He's got to be over 30. He's on the wrong side of 30.
You do mention the touchdown pass to Juwan Johnson, and it was an interesting sequence to me because the Bears had some personnel confusion before that. They were trying to figure out which group to have in the game. There was a mass substitution there. They come running on, and then they had a little bit of a busted coverage on the back end where it looked like either Jack Sanborn or Elijah Hicks were having some crossed wires in terms of who's responsible for the tight end in that circumstance, and it ends up being the go-ahead touchdown in the last score of the game for the Saints. And so it's tough little bit there. I'm seeing that you got an answer for me.
He's 33 years old.
Close to 40.
He's been in the league since 2017, and people still can't stop him. I mean, when he's in the game, he's running the ball.
Yeah,
he's running the ball.
And they did a good job in spurts, but then there's a couple that get out of the gates, and then he passes the ball, and he throws a touchdown pass at one point, and
yeah, that was nice.
He catches it's just the whole thing. There's a lot that goes with this. They just need to be better. The one thing that we'd be talking about a lot if the Bears had won this game is that touchdown catch by Cole Kmet in the first quarter.
Yeah,
David,
catch.
I mean, like, my God, there's one angle of a replay where Tyrann Mathieu, you can just see his hands getting ready to catch the ball, and then somehow Big Cole comes over the top and is able to make that catch. That was a moment, it's an exclamation point moment where you're like, these are the contributions you need when you're a team like the Bears. They just get too few of them, and they're too infrequent.
DJ Moore didn't have a good day, did he? He fumbled, and he had a pass that he got his hands on in the end zone, and he's going to tell you, I think, when he's on the Mully and Haugh show at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, he might say he needs to catch that pass in the end zone.
Yeah, trying to find his final numbers on the day, and there's some moments that you got to capitalize on. DJ Moore was targeted today 5 times, had 3 grabs for 44. A little bit of a Darnell Mooney resurgent. He had 5 catches for 82 today. Deontay Foreman, 83 yards on 20 rushes. There were another couple moments today where it looked like he was a breath away from breaking a big one, including one that I think he ended up punching the turf 4 or 5 times. The Bears settled for a field goal on the drive that could have been a game-changing touchdown if he could have just kept his footing. He went down there, and these are the types of things that happen when you're a losing football team. You come out on the wrong end of those things. I believe the Bears had 8 penalties, the Saints only 1. We already mentioned the takeaways. All of it's bothersome.
Third straight game where they've had 7 or more penalties, I believe. And it only happened 3 times last year. I think they're up to 5 this year in 9 games.
Bayless Jones had one of those penalties, a face mask penalty. I think he had dropped a pass earlier in the game.
Flusy didn't have his back post game saying, if you're in the NFL, you shouldn't be grabbing a face mask. Why don't you, if you're going to be that accountable and that publicly, cut him already.
Yeah,
cut him.
I mean, like, you're basically giving him a roster spot to tell people that long kickoffs are going out of the end zone and it's going to be a touchback at the 25.
All right, let's get we could go on all night, but let's get to a couple 3-word reviews that were sent in on at Take the North Pod.
Yeah, you know how much our audience loves to play the game and how much they get in there. I'll give you a handful here.
Okay.
Chuck Humbertson gave us "Don't Sweat It." We talked about earlier the first game for Montez Sweat. This was a common theme. This one's from Conceptual Art and Teaching. That's an interesting Twitter handle, but no QB controversy. I think you're rubber stamping that verdict in terms of the Bears not having a.
I love the story, but it just ended.
Combination. Jordan Gold gives a one. He says the culture is great. We talked about that the other day. We got those culture ribbons from Michaels to hand out again on Monday because they were so close again today, David, and they handled another rough week with great grace and poise. So kudos to them. At Bears fan 127 gives us "So Far Away." I think I would agree with that. Another culture still awesome one. Kevin Wynn says Fields is QB1. He's not wrong there. Wrexham AFC, I'm going to throw a penalty flag on him because he tried to make the last word of this 3-word review all one word, and it's Poles missed C.J. Stroud, and he made C.J. Stroud all one word. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because it is a good sentiment here because the Bears said last winter that they'd have to be blown away. C.J. Stroud apparently lit it up again today for the Houston Texans and is lighting it up for 2 months now at the start of his rookie season.
We're about to see Bryce Young. Okay, this is what we need to talk about maybe tomorrow or maybe moving forward. So Will Levis, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. Rank them. Rank them.
All right, we're gonna put studs on that task. I got this. This one was from MTO, and I don't know if he missed a comma here, David, but his was "No More Dan." And I don't know if it was supposed to be "No More, comma Dan," meaning like and he doesn't want any more, or he just wants "No More" me, which would be a tough break for me.
Tough.
E. Brown 1481 throws us "When's the draft?" Always last weekend of April. You should know this by now because it's all we ever talk about with the Bears. Jeff Bukowski gives a one that you could put in here pretty much every single week. Sell the team. People have had that sentiment for a long time. That's followed by Beer Man gives us Miss Kasky should sell. A couple more here. Mike Haig gives us "Glad they covered." So if somebody's happy with
They
part
did
of
think they're getting
part of
8.5.
the result today. And then turnovers baked bears from Joel W. Greg Johnson cut Velus Jones, and the last one from Mark, second half predictable.
The Bears have not won in that building since 1991. And yet, as bad as it is, we just went over it in 20 minutes of misery. As bad as it is, if you had told somebody in January 20th, 1986, okay, you can win this game, but if you win this game, you're going to struggle like for the next 40 years in this building. Do you want to win this game and struggle into perpetuity? Or would you lose this game and you're going to win every game you play against the Saints for the next 40 years? I think they still would have taken Super Bowl 20, my friend.
I would have taken Super Bowl 20, and then I was sitting over here, over to my left on New Year's Day of 2002 for Rohan Davey versus Kurt Kittner in the Sugar Bowl. I would have taken an Illinois win in that game too, even if it meant never experiencing a joyous moment in this building again.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, you need to get to the French Quarter. We need to let you have some dinner. Great job with the reporting from the Superdome. Another Bears loss, 24-17. We'll be back Tuesday morning. We'll drop another podcast so you can listen to what we have to say about moving forward. And then it's a short week, so we'll have another one Thursday before the game. If we can swing it, we will. Just keep it tuned on at Take the North Pod on Twitter, and follow Dan's, and you read his column at chicagotribune.com. You can read mine at 670thescore.com. And we'll be on your Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts all week long. Anything else, Dan?
No, I think that's it. Let's get out of here and regroup. With short week 10. Here we are. We've already made
week 10. That they have 8 games left, and that is more of a threat than a promise. All right.
Wait until that finale at Lambeau. Woo.
Can't wait for that one. That's gonna be quite the matchup. All right. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. We will talk to you next time.